With this session update, I'm Shannon Lurkey. A bill that would provide a restorative justice option throughout Minnesota to veterans charged with criminal offenses related to injuries or disorders stemming from their service came before the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. Here are some highlights of that hearing.
This bill is about helping veterans who served, who are maybe suffering from a military service-related disorder, to keep them out of prison if necessary, and send them down a path of treatment, rehabilitation, so that they can be reintegrated fully back into the community instead of being housed in a prison, state prison somewhere.
In 2015, I first came to Veterans Court for a marijuana violation. It was I had a 5th degree possession of marijuana, so it was I think about the lowest felony possession that you can have for marijuana. I was over the threshold of 48 grams or something like that in my home. And I had a choice of I could either go to jail for 3 years or I could go to Veterans Court. And at the time, there was the only thing that was advantageous for me about going to Veterans Court was that I wouldn't have to go to jail for 3 years for some marijuana. So at the time I went, and it hooked me up with the VA. And I think kind of going back to what Roger was saying, is not only does it save money through not having to incarcerate people, but it's also saving money because all these programs at the VA are already there for veterans. So you don't have to, we're not starting anything new. We're not building anything from the ground up. The veterans are going to VA and getting the care that they should receive before they ever showed up for a court hearing.
Veterans, when we come home, and when I did after 2 deployments, I had about a year before I went to law school. During that time, it was difficult to find a job. The recession was starting to kind of get a little better, but it was difficult. So for me to come into the society and come from a position where I was leading people as a squad leader to applying for jobs that, in my opinion, were well below what I was probably capable of doing was frustrating. Also, there's a tendency, I believe, across the board when you talk to infantrymen and combat arms men that are directly involved and engaged in combat, that you naturally don't have a lot of coping mechanisms when you get out of the military. I think the most frequent one, and one that I used quite often, was to drink alcohol. I would have to say that was a release for me. I could go home from a job that I didn't like. I could be in front of the TV. I could have my bottle, my friend, because that was there. I wanted to feel good. That was my release. I think a lot of veterans share that. There's a sense of you are lost somewhat in the world when you come back to it. You hear a lot about the fog of war and the chaos of war and the confusion of war, and that's definitely true. I think that there's also a fog when you get back into the civilian world. I didn't feel like I was a part of society necessarily. I felt as an outsider. I knew I was different. I knew that the thoughts I had were different. Things had changed you. And I think a lot of veterans come back and they do have those issues with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, but there's also a sense of you've lost a part of you. You've come from doing a very important mission, or what you thought was a very important mission, to maybe now washing dishes or doing something that is below that. So it is an ego check. Now, that being said, it's not infrequent when I do our Veterans Court in Washington County that we run into people that were in the same situation that I was in, a little bit lost, a little bit frustrated, and confused. And with each case that I have, there's common themes. One of those is substance abuse of some sort, which then leads to contact with law enforcement. It happens, it's unfortunate, but that's a reality that we live in.
As a quadriplegic, and I've been in the wheelchair for over 35 years, and I don't mean to diminish any of this as far as what our two previous speakers have gone through. I'm not a combat veteran. but I did break my neck at a time as a young man that totally changed my life in a blink of an eye. So I recognize from Mr. Miller's testimony that the loss, the frustration, those feelings of abandonment, not knowing what's going on. I don't remember 1983 because of my solution to my confusion and hurt was to be completely drunk and high or stoned. I wasn't really going to talk about that, but I wanted to emphasize on some of the emotional things that that this particular bill brings up. So I too have known many people who have gone through the court system and just given a chance might have been able to change their direction to a point that they're able to continue on without a degree of a stain completely marking them for the rest of their life.
A lot of you on this committee come from greater Minnesota districts. You represent veterans who don't have access to veterans treatment court programming like a lot of the metro area veterans have access to. Now, this act doesn't create veterans treatment courts, but it adds the parameters for district courts in greater Minnesota to treat their veterans with the same respect that those in the metro area have access to. And I would like to note, I see some of you on the committee who were present at the Landmark Center, January 22nd, 2019. It's 2 years ago tomorrow, standing beside Governor Walz saying this is something we need to get done. 2 years ago tomorrow. So I guess in the pace of legislative procedure, 2 years on a bill is actually pretty reasonable.
It is a bill that saves taxpayers money. It's a bill that helps veterans in greater Minnesota. And it helps prevent radicalization of veterans. It's not being talked about a lot because the American public has a very high opinion of veterans. We're very lucky to be considered very favorably, almost universally. But this is a bill that helps stop radicalization of veterans. If we think back in history, the Hells Angels were founded by disaffected World War II veterans. We need to get these veterans with mental illnesses from service connection out of prisons where they can be recruited and radicalized, and instead into treatment to prevent the violence. This is a public safety issue.